Hello and welcome to What's on My Mind with Fiona. I'm your host, Fiona Kane. And today I'm going to be talking about what's on my mind, some things in the news. Now, continuing on for the last few weeks, I have been talking about the Paris Olympics. Sorry, but I'm going to be talking a little bit about that again today, at least at the beginning here, because there's still a few things going on in the news in regards to that. I've noticed that this week they've been trying to they've put out a photo shoot of I think the pronunciation might be Emain Khalif, the boxer who appears to me, as far as I don't know, how do I know? I don't have the information. No one has, but someone who appears to be XY, so actually genetically a man who's got the benefit of testosterone, but who thought that they were female due to the fact that they've got DSD, sex different sex. My brain's not going to do it today, but anyway, they would have been born with sort of intersex, that kind of thing. So, look, to my knowledge, that's who we're dealing with here, and until we have proof otherwise, that's what I will assume. And this person, this week, they released a photo shoot with all these lovely feminine, lots of makeup, pretty clothes, and very soft focus, soft lens kind of photos to feminize this person. So just continuing to gaslight people who know what a man looks like and who are not afraid to say it. Until I see a genetic test tell me that this person is XX, then I don't believe it. And it's super unfair. And it's really interesting this week because what I noticed is the next thing I'm going to be talking about is Raygun, who is the Australian female breakdancer at the Olympics. The biggest thing I noticed this week is in the media, it was crazy, is that a lot of people reacted to Raygun. Look, for those of you who didn't see it, you have to check it out, Google it, have a look. But anyway, this breakdancer, in my opinion, it was pretty ordinary. Look, I can't do breakdancing at all. I'm hopeless at anything like that. But this is someone who clearly is also not great at it either. And I googled and looked at some of the other people who this person was competing against to even go to the Olympics, and the other people looked far better to me. To my look, I like uninformed. I don't know. So I'm not pretending I'm the expert in breakdancing. But anyway, this person set the internet on fire, and there was two groups of people. There was the one group of people that said, "Wow, what? You're kidding, are you?" And look, from a perspective of it was a bit of fun and it was funny and it was kind of like, people are laughing at the kangaroo pose and things like that. Yeah, it's quirky and it was fun, and from that point of view, you can say, well, it was a good fun thing, and yeah, I get that. I can relate to that. That makes perfect sense to me. On the other hand, there was a whole lot of people saying this person was really, really hopeless and how did they get in? And it would appear, I don't know how it works, but the fact that they're not bringing in breakdancing next time at the next Olympics and they're questioning about who they pass off the job of working out the entry requirements and the competition, and that seems to be under a bit of a cloud. So I don't know. Basically, possibly whether this person should have been the best qualified or not. I don't know. But what was really interesting though is, you see when the memo goes out to people on the left, you see the memo goes out and this is what we all believe, and all of a sudden everyone came out and said, "Oh, you're picking on Raygun. That's misogyny. Yes, it's misogyny. It's terrible. Don't pick on Raygun. She's fantastic. She's brilliant. Don't believe your lying eyes. She's our best. She's our best breakdancer." And and the whole kind of like, and again, if it's just about don't be mean to someone, yeah, I get that. And if it's, and if she was like like was Eddie the Eel, was that at the Sydney Olympics? But you've got these people along the way at different Olympics who, like, they're real underdogs, and they get in there and they have a go and they're representing their country and they're trying really hard, and there are those stories, and she was one of those kind of like hero stories like that. Yeah, I could get behind that. I'm not so sure that she is. Like, I get, yeah, she's having a go. And look, the fact that she's figured out how to qualify and how to get the taxpayers to pay for her to go there, a free trip to Europe, and she's traveling around Europe now. Good on her. Like, she's clearly good at figuring out how to make the system work for her. I'll give her that. Whether or not she's a talented breakdancer, I don't know. The jury seems to be out on that. I'm not an expert. But she doesn't look great. But the thing that kind of turns me off and kind of makes me a bit more suspicious and a bit more sort of judgy about this is that she's forged a career at Macquarie University, which is heavily subsidised by the taxpayer at that university, and she's got this niche field of breakdancing that she's studying. She's written this. She's got a PhD, so she's got a doctorate in sort of all this weird gobbledygook around breakdancing. So it's kind of her abstract has all those academic buzzwords, like regurgitating all those words like institutionalization and those things like we argue that breaking's institutionalization via the Olympics will place breaking more firmly within the sporting nation's hegemonic settler colonial structures that rely upon racialized and gendered hierarchies, right? So basically, she's got a PhD and she's doing a study that's about woke gibberish, right? So good on her for figuring out how to get funded for that. But as a taxpayer, I resent that kind of role. I think we could be doing some useful things in universities, and that doesn't sound so useful to me. From that point of view, I'm like, oh, she's. I was reading what Jack Horton wrote. He's on skynews.com.au, and he was saying, there's a degree of narcissism in this sort of academia, and I agree. And the first sentence on the introduction of her PhD paper was all about her. It was sort of she sort of referred. You can be. Yeah, she just wrote a line about herself. But look, the other thing too is that she I personally think that this whole qualification in the Olympics and this performance, and she kind of deliberately did a bit of a kind of a daggy sort of performance. And, you could say that she was taking risks and whatever, and she was. So fair enough. And she's trying different things like the kangaroo, whatever. So I get all that. But I think that ultimately, I suspect that she's going to get another grant to do 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, I don't know, to write some other paper about the qualifying for the Olympics and the inherent misogyny and how everyone hated her and all that sort of stuff. So I bet she's actually going to turn this whole thing, the media thing, everything, what I'm saying, everything into just another a whole lot of funding to write a whole bunch of gobbledygook about nothing again. So my guess is what she's going to do with all this. I don't know, could be wrong. We shall see. But what really, look, good, bad, whatever, in regards to that, what really frustrates me though is all the lefties. Like I used to class myself as a leftist, care about the underdog and fairness and all that sort of stuff. Not one of them is saying anything about men punching women in a boxing, but they're all going on about the inherent misogyny and saying a breakdancer looks like they're pretty hopeless. And she does look like she's pretty hopeless, right? So with her, it was misogyny and everyone had to come out and rescue her and everyone had to come out and defend her. Where are the people defending their women getting punched in the face by men? That's what I would like to know. It's really interesting in this day and age what's defensible and what's not. And I would say women getting punched in the face by men should be the ones we're defending, not the ones who getting lots of funding by the government to write worthless papers and prance around and play around with breakdancing. But anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. And like I always say, this is just about my opinion. I'm not an expert in these things. I'm just giving an opinion. Everyone's entitled to one. You can agree or disagree. That's fine. So on some good news this week, some really good things have come out on the news this week. So one of them is I've been following, I don't know his full name, but his name on X, that used to be Twitter, is James Esses, and he's based in the UK. He won his court case. Now, he was studying, I'm just going to find it again so I can tell you about it, but he was actually studying psychology. And because he ultimately was concerned about gender, the things that I talk about on here, what he was concerned about is the whole affirmation thing where all we do is affirm people on their gender and don't question things at all. What's been happening and what they're trying to do in a lot of places, I'll explain it to you, what they're trying to do in a lot of, from a law perspective in the US and also in the UK, and I think in Australia as well. In the West, we're so great when it comes to things like this. What they're trying to do is they're trying to do something that sounds good. So what sounds good, what they're trying to do is uh, ban, what's it called? Conversion therapy, right? So that sounds like a good idea because you think, okay, well, we're saying that you can't try and convert people. That's a good thing, right? So convert used to mean, what it used to mean is that trying to kick the gay out of gay people, right? So sometimes it was even uh, electric shock therapy, right? So they do all sorts of weird therapies and cruel therapies on people to stop them from being gay. Now, of course, you can't do that, and I don't think that's healthy or good. And I'm glad that that's not acceptable anymore in Australia, in the Western world, anyway. So that's a good thing. But what they've done now is they've hooked in the trans stuff into this. So what they've done now, when you hear of conversion therapy, they're not talking about trying to stop a gay person from being gay. What they're talking about is talking to a person who believes they are trans about what's going on for them and just helping them explore what might be happening. Because what we do know, I don't have all the figures in front of me, but what we do know is I'm still just like, while I'm talking to you, so I'm looking down because I'm just looking for that other article that I'm referring back to about James Esses. But what we do know is that when people come out and say that they believe they're trans, more often than not, these are people who are suffering from mental health issues anyway. Sometimes there's drugs or alcohol involved. They're often people who they're on the spectrum, they have autism or like some other kind of neurodivergent issue or challenge that they're dealing with. It's quite common. I'm not saying all with any of this, but it's quite common for them to be people who have had any kind of trauma or sexual abuse, that kind of thing. So essentially, these are people with it's complicated, right? So they might be suffering from gender. I don't know if they call it dysphoria or dysmorphia. I've seen both words used, but they're suffering from this issue where they don't feel comfortable in their own body. And what we do know for a fact is that what cures that in the majority of cases is actual going through puberty, because it's puberty that sorts all of that out. By the time people get to the other side of puberty, most people, it's sorted, right? So for starters, that's a good reason just to let people have puberty, because puberty is actually the solution. It's nature's solution to that issue. Not underplaying the fact that this can be very stressful and difficult issue for some people and a major mental health issue for some people. But because it is that is actually why, in my opinion, it is incumbent on medical professionals and health professionals and mental health professionals to explore these things with someone. So if someone comes presenting as thinking that they're trans, thinking that they're the other sex, rather than simply saying, yes, you are, I say, okay, well, maybe you are, but hey, let's explore why do you think you are? And let's just look at all of the things going on in your life and look at all of those things. Because what you would find is if you looked at the person's level of anxiety or depression or dealt with some of the issues around how they're managing themselves as someone living with autism or how they're dealing with traumas from their past, when you deal with those things, you will often find that the person is not trans. The person is just having really big issues that they need to deal with. The problem with banning what they call conversion therapy, well, that's classed as conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is anything besides, yes, you are trans, let's just put you on the train to changing over, right? And when we know that the majority of people are not trans, they don't need that. So what they need is to explore other things. I'm not saying that the therapist should be saying, no, you're not, you can't be, that sort of thing. That's not okay. But to explore the whole idea, look, and even Jordan Peterson says this, and he's a psychologist, and I would agree the same thing as doing some counseling and things, is that when someone comes to me with an issue, my job is not to affirm that person. My job is to help them explore what's going on, what's behind it, what's, and generally speaking, they come to you because they're having problems, and so they don't need to be affirmed. They actually they need help, they need strategies, they need you help to help explore what might be going wrong for them so that they can get better. So any model that just affirms anyone with any mental health issue, just straight bang affirms them, is wrong. So that's what they're trying to do when they say they're trying to ban conversion therapy. What they're trying to ban is any model where you just help someone explore what's going on for them. And that's all it is, exploring. It's not forcing someone one thing or another. It's just exploring, okay, well, you believe you're born in the wrong body. Let's explore that and look at why. So anyway, getting back to James, he won his court case this week. And so what happened for him, he found that he's doing his course. I think he was 2 years into his course. I'm just going to make this writing a little bit bigger so I can tell you. So he said here, it's in the news article, he said he was expelled from his psychotherapy school over his gender critical views. And what happened is that the institute in London that he was studying with, the Metanoia Institute, he was taken off his master's course for raising concerns about transgender issues and the treatment of children. The institute this week admitted that it was wrong to expel him, and they apologised for their treatment of him. They've also acknowledged that it's reasonable to question those things, because now we've had the CAS review and the WPATH files, and the CAS review is a review by a doctor who did a 4-year review on this whole transitioning of children and found that there's no benefit really to transitioning children, and if anything, there's harm. And so she sort of said, no, this is not a good idea. And so a lot of health, a lot of government and health authorities are looking at that and kind of changing the rules. And I think they've certainly, in government situations, they've stopped using puberty blockers in the UK, and with private places, I'm not quite sure yet, but they're slowing down and trying to stop that. So essentially, he turned out to be right, and they've finally apologised. But this is something that's been going on for years, and it's cost him thousands of dollars, and it cost him sort of that career. I don't know that he even wants to finish that and do that career now. But yeah, they've accepted that they breached their own policies by expelling him without due process, and accepted that gender critical beliefs were protected under the Equality Act, and how important free speech is. Now, if you think about this, there's a lot of people, therapists and people like that, who are afraid to speak out because they get kicked out of uni for doing that. They get kicked out of their jobs for doing that, which is terrible, because if you're talking about like any kind of medical treatment, but especially medical treatments with children who cannot consent properly to these treatments. And that's weird, because people understand when they're talking about sex, people understand consent, and people understand that children, like minors, are minors and they can't consent. But when we talk about operations to cut off their genitals, and drugs and operations that will cause them to have possible be medicalized for their whole lives, possibly have no sexual gratification for their lives. In some cases, that's exactly what happens. To be infertile for their whole life, to be maybe a lot of what they do is, I class it as mutilation, to maybe have this regret and these changes for their whole life. Young women who can't breastfeed because they've had mastectomies for the purposes of these trans ideas. And when we're talking about things like that, for doctors and therapists to not actually be allowed to question that is terrible. Science, we have to be able to question science. So, is this working? Do we have proof that it's working? And is this a good idea? And if it's not, then it's definitely not. So anyway, I'm glad that James won that court case, or he got the settlement, and he got the apology. And hopefully that means it won't happen to other people. But what's happened this week as well, and more good news, is the American Society of Plastic Surgeons have become the first major medical association to change the consensus of medical groups over gender affirming care for minors. So essentially they've said, we don't think it's a good idea. Now, I'm just going over to the article I have here about that. So the issue is in regards to this, because people sort of say, well, if it's, why does it get approved? If it's wrong, why does it get approved? All these medical people approve it, so it must be okay. What happens though is, what you've got to think about is, in a if when a child or whoever, when someone goes to get these treatments, so first they go to the therapist, who's not allowed to discuss with them any other options. So the therapist, instead of exploring all the options like I talked about before, the therapist has to affirm them. So the therapist is like, oh, yes, okay, yes, you are trans. So straight away, very, very quickly, they get affirmed. Some people have a lot of therapy. Some people have very brief. They have 30 minutes, 1 or 2 sessions, and they are affirmed, and they are approved for things like puberty blockers and surgeries, right? So the first person who's not allowed to question anything, because if they do, it's classed as conversion therapy, and they can lose their licenses and get in all sorts of trouble, they feel pressured to just go along with it. So many of them do, right? So then the person goes to the endocrinologist, who prescribes the hormones or the hormone blockers or whatever it is, and the endocrinologist assumes, well, okay, the previous doctor looked after all this. Everything's cool. I'm just going to go ahead and just go along with their recommendation. And so then they refer them to the surgeon, the plastic surgeon, and the plastic surgeon says, oh, well, the endocrinologist and the psychiatrist approved this. I'm fine with it, right? And so everyone just believes that somebody else figured it out. Somebody else made sure it was okay. Somebody else is making sure that ethically this is okay. The person understands what they're doing. The person is right to do this. It's a good idea. It's going to be helpful. It's going to save this person's life. So everyone's kind of just assuming that the last person on the chain did the right thing, right? And it's not necessarily the case, because the right thing is the wrong thing, because the right thing is to save their career, which means the wrong thing, as in not exploring things and just saying yes and affirming people, right? I know it gets confusing. The right things become the wrong thing, but that's how it is, unfortunately. So anyway, this here in this article, it says this is in the City Journal. And the article is called A Consensus No Longer. And it says the main justification for gender affirming care for minors in the US has been that all major US medical associations support it. And critics of this supposed consensus have argued that it's not grounded in high quality research, which it's not. I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can go and read it yourself. But further down, I'll just sort of say to you, it said, they what they do in these things is they were relying on a place called WPATH, and WPATH are the people who do all the recommendations to all the medical associations in regards to this surgery. WPATH aren't even a proper medical group. WPATH are just a lobbying group that they're ideological groups. So they've got this power that they shouldn't have, where people are listening to them. Anyway, people are realizing they shouldn't be listening to them. They're also looking at the results from things like the CAS report and studies, and saying that, this is not evidence-based medicine. So they're saying here that the evidence for youth gender transition is low quality. Low quality actually means that there's uncertainty about whether the long-term benefits outweigh the harms, and they just don't, right? And it's supposed to be first to no harm in medicine. So the evidence for those harms, which includes infertility, sexual dysfunction, agony of regret, and sometimes agony of pain and health issues. Rather than that, how about let's have some prioritized psychotherapy and get help for these people? And so they're essentially just saying that, hey, they've been doing the wrong thing. It's actually not helping these children. Sheila Nazarian, a plastic surgeon who practices in Beverly Hills, she was interviewed for this article, and she said that the colleagues in her field are increasingly expressing concern about the use of hormones and surgeries to help minors who experience distress associated with their sex. Many, however, fear that voicing these concerns will bring professional and social blowback. It's a real problem when colleagues are afraid to debate any medical treatment or procedure, and especially when minors are the patients. That's what Nazarian said. She said, I've been following this international debate on youth gender medicine for some time now, and know we, the US, are far behind in recognising the lack of evidence for long-term benefits, something that our European colleagues have done. Like I said, the CAS report in the UK, they're starting to recognise this, and they recognise it even before, earlier. It's been recognised in the Nordic countries, in places like Sweden and Norway, where they said, wrong way, go back. But the US and Australia don't listen. They all fail and say, wrong way, go back. And we all jump in and say it's a good idea. So that is good news. The good news is that there are people breaking the chain saying, no, actually, this isn't okay. And that's what we need. We need people breaking that chain saying this is not okay, because these are children who cannot consent. And what they do when they're adults, that's a whole different story, and you can argue that point. But protecting children when they need therapy for other reasons, they need support and strategies for other reasons, and they don't need adults to harm them any more than whatever they may have already been harmed, which is actually what's happening with this gender affirming care. So when people are talking about banning conversion therapy, you think, oh, that sounds like a good idea because conversion therapy is bad. Understand that in the case of this, conversion therapy means just having a reasonable discussion and exploring with a person what else is going on for them, so you can help them without having to do terribly expensive, invasive, life-altering, life-changing, and sometimes disastrous surgeries and interventions. Anyway, so there's some good news in there that people are starting to wake up, and because people are like, oh, they do it, so it must be okay. But you've got to understand that they feel pressured to do it. Nobody wants to say anything because it's like, if I say something, I'll get in trouble. This is surgeons. This is surgeons who have trouble. What the hell has happened in this world that we cannot talk about the truth, and we cannot have conversations, and we cannot have debate and dialogue? Look, I could be right or wrong about whatever I'm saying, but it's so, so important that the only way we learn, the only way we get better at what we do, the only way we improve things is by talking about it. I was having this conversation with my hairdresser the other day. And I said, say you're talking to your sister about something and you've got a problem you're trying to work out, and you've been thinking in your mind, you think you've got this really good idea for the solution, and you voice that solution, and as you say it, you think, oh, wow, that sounds stupid. Or your sister says, that sounds silly. What ought to do that for? Because it doesn't make sense, right? You have to be able to say the wrong thing to figure out the right thing, because we think when we write, we think when we speak, we think when we converse. So the truth is, you have to be able to have people say, I don't know, that's a good idea. Oh, I think this is a good, but what about that? But what about that? That is how we learn. That is how we nut through an issue and figure it out. But if you have got surgeons and therapists and people everywhere along the chain who are terrified to speak out because they're going to have their career destroyed, everyone's quiet, and these horrible things are allowed to happen to children, right? So we actually have to have a society where we can have difficult discussions, we can disagree, because it's not until you air things that sometimes you see they are valid and they're useful, or actually, you know what, they're really problematic and here's why, and let's discuss that, let's figure it out. But in a world where people are silenced, that's the danger. That's where these things are able to happen. So it's not about whether I'm right or wrong. What I'm trying to do is have a discussion, start a discussion, and say we need to better talk about these things. And regardless of me being right or wrong, the discussions need to happen. So we get it right, and we look after the children. Anyway, I will leave it there. I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you again next week. And please like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Really appreciate it. So I can build up my listeners and people who watch on Rumble and YouTube. See you next week. Thanks. Bye.